55 heartbeats. That was exactly how many girls were breathing when I opened my eyes on the blood-soaked sand. But my system interface only showed one survivor. Me. Wanna know why the counter didn't in Oppos? To include them? Because if I trusted the wrong set of eyes, the island would consume my flesh before sunset. By the end of this video, you and Oppos LL understand why the most dangerous monsters aren't in Oppos. T the ones hiding in the jungle, but the ones smiling by the fire. The salt stung my cracked lips. I sat up, my head pounding with the rhythm of the crashing waves. The wreckage of Flight 404 was scattered across the jagged rocks like a broken spine. 55 girls in torn academy uniforms were sobbing, pulling themselves from the smoking debris. I ignored their cries and checked my glowing blue interface again. Survivors. 1. Status. Expendable. Was the system glitching? Or was it telling a truth I wasn't in Oppos? T ready to accept? I didn't in Oppos. T have time to debate. The sun was dipping below the thick canopy, casting long, twisted shadows across the white beach. The waves hit the reef with a rhythmic thumping that sounded like a heavy countdown. One of the girls, a blonde with a shredded blazer, stumbled toward me. Her knees gave out, and she dragged herself across the broken shells. She reached out a trembling hand, tears streaming down her soot-stained cheeks. The metallic scent of blood hung heavy in the humid air. And quote, please and quote. She choked out, her voice raw, and quote, help us. We Don and Oppos. T know what to do. And quote. I looked at her outstretched hand. Then I looked at the tree line. The jungle was too quiet. No birds chirping. No insects buzzing. Just a suffocating, unnatural silence that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The shadows between the ancient trees seemed to crawl. I stepped back. She fell forward into the sand. I didn't in Oppos. T catch her. I wasn't in Oppos. T playing the hero. The glowing red text in the corner of my vision made my priorities brutally clear, accompanied by a sharp throbbing in my temples. Objective. Survive Night 1. Expected casualties. 98%. The wailing of the other survivors echoed against the sheer cliffs, amplifying the sound of their blind panic. They were clustering together, drawn instinctively to the warmth of a small fuel fire burning near the shattered fuselage. It was a textbook survival instinct. Find your own kind. Stay in the light. Huddle for warmth. It was also the fastest way to die on an uncharted, hostile island. They were painting a massive, glowing target on their own backs. I turned my back on the flickering fire and walked toward the dark, imposing edge of the jungle. The blonde girl scrambled to her knees, screaming at my retreating figure. She called me a monster. She called me a coward. She swore that if rescue came, she would leave me behind. I let the angry words wash over me, feeling nothing. Emotion was a luxury I couldn't and Oppos afford. I needed fresh water. I needed a defensible shelter. I needed a weapon. And above all, I needed to figure out what my neural interface meant by the word and Oppos. Expendable and Oppos. I stepped into the thick, damp foliage. The air instantly turned freezing cold, dropping at least 20 degrees in a single second. A low, guttural click echoed from the thick canopy above me. What kind of predator announces its presence before striking? I froze, my muscles coiled tight, ready to sprint or fight. The shadows shifted, pulling back to reveal a massive, insectoid leg clinging to the bark of a towering mahogany tree. I reached into my torn pocket and gripped the only tool I had, a sharp, shattered piece of plain window. And quote, Don and Oppos, T move and quote. A voice whispered from the dense bushes to my left. And quote, who in Oppos? There? And quote, I asked. And quote, someone who knows what that thing is. And quote, then tell me how to kill it. And quote, you can and Oppos, T. And quote, a girl stepped out of the foliage. She was and Oppos, T, one of the sobbing students from the beach. Her uniform was dry, her eyes were dead, and she held a sharpened stick with the casual, balanced grip of a seasoned killer. I didn't inapos. Know it yet, but this brief encounter would teach me the true cost of breathing. The system wasn't inapos. Tracking my health. It was tracking my humanity. The insectoid creature clicked again, preparing to leap from the branch. My chest tightened. I braced for the heavy impact, gripping the glass shard so hard it bit deep into my palm. For a terrifying second, I thought it was over. I thought my first night would be my last. Then the strange girl threw her wooden spear. It didn't inapos. Hit the creature. It hit a glowing blue mushroom clinging to the tree trunk. The fungus burst in a thick cloud of luminous, suffocating spores. The creature shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and scrambled higher into the dark canopy, fleeing from the burning dust. My heart hammered against my ribs. Relief washed over me like a cold wave. We were safe. I exhaled, turning to thank my unexpected savior. Then she pressed the tip of a second, hidden blade against my throat. Drop the glass . She commanded. I let the sharp shard fall into the damp earth. The cold metal against my skin was a harsh reminder of my current rank in this twisted ecosystem. At the very bottom, why did I expect gratitude? Why did I think a shared enemy made us allies? In a place where the survival rate hovered near zero, every living, breathing human was just violent competition for scarce resources. Your interface. She muttered, her dark eyes darting to the empty air beside my head where only I could see the screens. What does it say? It says I and Apos am the only survivor. I replied. She didn't inapos. Blink. She didn't inapos. Looked surprised. Instead, a grim, humorless smile crept onto her chapped lips. She lowered the rusted blade a fraction of an inch, just enough to let me swallow. So, she whispered. You and Apos. Re the anomaly. I rubbed my neck, stepping cautiously away from the sharp edge. What does that mean? She didn't inapos. Answer. A sudden, piercing scream shattered the quiet night air. Came from the beach, the fuel fire, the 54 other girls. The screams multiplied rapidly, layering over each other in a chaotic symphony of pure, unadulterated terror. The sickening sound of tearing flesh echoed through the ancient trees. The firelight flickered wildly, casting horrific, distorted shadows against the jungle wall. I turned my body, ready to run toward them. She grabbed my arm with bruising force. Let them die. She said. The system interface chimed loudly in my ear. A new notification glowed aggressively in my retina. A sharp, drilling pain flared behind my eyes, making me wince and stumble. Warning. Culling in progress. Do not interfere. I stared at the glowing red text. The human screams slowly faded into wet, methodical crunches. What exactly was hunting them out there in the sand? Wait, let me rewind. Because I lied about something. I told you I heard 55 heartbeats on that beach. But as the screams finally died down, the blue interface hovering in my vision updated the death toll. It didn't inapos. Read 55. It read 54. Someone else had survived the culling. Every choice I made from that second onward was leading to that one word I would eventually whisper. I looked at the girl with the rusted blade. She was staring at the distant, dying firelight. We need to move. I said. They are feeding. She replied. Who is they? The locals. We plunged deeper into the freezing foliage. Every step required calculated effort. The thorny vines seemed to actively reach for my exposed ankles, tearing at the fabric of my trousers. The temperature continued to plummet, freezing the sweat against my spine. I glanced back, half expecting to see 50 mangled corpses chasing us through the gloom. There was nothing, just the oppressive, suffocating darkness pressing inward. Did I feel guilty for leaving them behind? No. Did that make me a terrible? Sharp stalactites hung from the ceiling like jagged teeth, threatening to impale anyone careless enough to stand tall. I dragged my hands along the damp walls, searching for any secondary exits. There were none. We were boxed in. It was a perfect defensive position, provided the enemy only came from the front. But on this island, assumptions were lethal. The faint sound of dripping water echoed from the unseen depths. A small victory. We had shelter and hydration. I sank to the dusty floor, letting my exhausted muscles finally relax. For a brief moment, I thought we were safe. Then a low, rhythmic breathing echoed from the darkness right beside my left ear. I froze. My pulse skyrocketed. I fumbled for the glass shard I had dropped miles ago. I was completely unarmed. The heavy breathing stopped. Something shifted in the pitch-black void. End quote. Light it, end quote. The strange girl commanded from the tunnel entrance. She tossed a small, glowing green stone toward me. It struck the cavern floor and ignited with a brilliant, emerald flare. The sudden illumination revealed our cave mate. It wasn't an Apos, Tia monster. It was the 55th girl. She sat huddled against the damp wall, hugging her knees to her chest. Her uniform was torn, but she looked physically unharmed. I didn't an Apos. Know it yet, but this confined space would teach me the whisper. My neural display flared again, scanning the new arrival. But instead of reading her physical injuries, the glowing text focused on something else. Target. Emotional state. Despair. 89%. Harvest potential. High. Why was the system scanning her emotional decay instead of just looking for physical threats? End quote. Who are you? End quote. The new girl asked, her voice shaking violently. End quote. Survivors, end quote. I said, end quote. I thought I was alone. End quote. End quote. You were. Now you and Apos. Renat. End quote. The girl with the spear stepped fully into the emerald light. She didn't and Apos. Look at the trembling student. Her sharp eyes scanned the high ceiling of our stone refuge. End quote. We can and Apos. Stay long, end quote. The spear wielder muttered. End quote. The green light keeps the crawlers away, but it attracts the hunters, end quote. End quote. Hunters? End quote. The huddled girl whimpered, tears spilling down her pale cheeks. End quote. What are hunters? End quote. My interface suddenly chimed, projecting a massive red warning sign across my field of vision. A sharp, stinging sensation pierced my left eye, forcing me to blink rapidly. Warning. Harvest completed. Hostile mutation initiated. I rubbed my watering eye. The trembling girl slowly lowered her hands from her face. Her weeping had stopped. Her shoulders stopped shaking. In the eerie green glow, her dark eyes began to shift, turning a solid, reflecting silver. What was happening to her jaw? Her mouth unhinged. The sound of popping cartilage echoed loudly off the cavern walls. A sickening crack reverberated as her lower jaw dropped impossibly low, revealing rows of jagged, needle-like teeth. End quote. Get down. End quote. The spear wielder shouted. I threw myself flat against the cold dirt. The mutated student lunged, her fingers extending into cruel, blackened claws. She sailed right over my head, crashing into the stone wall with terrifying force. The impact would have shattered a normal human skull. She simply twisted her broken neck back into place with a wet crunch and smiled. I kicked her legs out from under her. She collapsed. My hands wrapped around a heavy rock. I raised it high, ready to smash it down. Then she spoke with the voice of my little sister. End quote. Don and Apos. Hurt me please, end quote. The creature begged. My arms locked midair. The stone felt impossibly heavy. The voice was perfect. It was the exact pitch, the exact frightened tone my sibling used during thunderstorms back home. The hesitation cost me dearly. The monster in Apos' claw lashed out, slicing across my forearm. Pain erupted, hot and blinding. It felt like liquid fire had been poured directly into my veins. I dropped the rock, stumbling backward until my spine hit the cold cave wall. The system in Apo's text burned brightly into my retina. Laceration, mild. Blood loss, 2%. I ignored the clinical report, clutching my bleeding arm. I could feel the warm, sticky blood soaking my torn sleeve, dripping down my fingertips and pooling in the dust. My vision blurred momentarily, forcing me to grind my teeth to stay conscious. The spear wielder didn't and Apo's hesitate. She drove her wooden weapon straight through the creature and Apo's chest, pinning it to the dusty floor. The silver-eyed thing shrieked, a deafening metallic screech that shook the dust from the ceiling, before finally going limp. I leaned against the jagged cave wall, gasping for air. My chest heaved as I stared at the blood pooling around my boots. We had survived our first real fight. It was Apo's clean, and it was Apo's heroic. But as I stared at the dead girl, watching the emerald light cast harsh shadows over her deformed face, I noticed something pulsing inside the fatal wound. It throbbed in perfect rhythm with my own racing heart. What was glowing underneath her broken ribs? I crept closer to the fallen girl. The pulsating light beneath her shattered ribs cast a sickly blue hue over the dirt. I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly. The spear wielder hissed a sharp warning, but morbid curiosity won. I touched the luminous mass, felt like grabbing a live wire. Searing heat shot up my arm, bypassing my muscles and burning directly into my nervous system. This wasn't Apo's about surviving the local wildlife anymore. The glowing object was a synthetic core, stamped with a tiny, metallic serial number. We weren't and Apo's marooned by accident. We were the prey in a heavily monitored, manufactured laboratory. My neural interface shattered into blinding static before rebooting with a violent screech in my mind. Foreign core detected. Assimilation. 10%. My chest tightened as the strange energy invaded my bloodstream, fighting my own white blood cells. The agony was excruciating. I collapsed onto my knees, clutching my ribs as the volatile blue light traveled up my prominent veins. It illuminated my pale skin from the inside out, making me look like a fragile paper lantern. The spear wielder stepped back, raising her wooden weapon toward my throat. I couldn't and Apo's blame her. I was mutating right in front of her eyes. But then the burning stopped abruptly. It was replaced by a strange, low-frequency humming vibration that settled deep in my marrow. The deep laceration on my forearm aggressively stitched itself together, leaving a smooth, metallic silver scar. I had found the source of the island and Apo's infection, a fabricated heart. But why was my body absorbing it instead of rejecting it like the others? And more importantly, who built the device in the first place? I pushed myself off the dusty floor, gasping for cool air. My limbs felt impossibly lighter, significantly faster. The bone-deep fatigue of the horrific crash had vanished completely, replaced by a jittery, predatory stamina. I looked at my hands, slowly flexing my newly healed fingers. Did I feel human? Barely. Did I care? Absolutely not. Survival in this hellscape demanded ruthless adaptation. The girl slowly lowered her crude spear, her dark eyes narrowing with intense, calculated suspicion. She circled me with the grace of a stalking panther, examining the fresh silver scar on my bicep. End quote. You assimilated it, end quote. She muttered, raw disbelief coloring her usually flat, emotionless tone. End quote. The other girls just broke. Their minds shattered. You absorbed the entire matrix. End quote. I didn't and Apo's have a logical answer for her. I turned my attention back to the dark tunnel ahead. With my newly enhanced vision, the impenetrable gloom peeled back, revealing hidden details. I could see the faint outline of a thick iron door buried deep in the cavern wall. I walked over, gripped the rusted handle, and pulled with a strength I didn't and Apo's I possessed. It groaned loudly, protesting decades of neglect. Before giving way, we stepped inside cautiously. Thick dust danced in the stale air. Rows of pristine, sealed metal crates lined the expansive shelves. Military rations, gallons of purified water, Advanced medical supplies. What else did the architects prepare for us in this subterranean tomb? I moved toward a massive control console occupying the center of the room. A thick layer of dust coated the blank monitors. I brushed it away, revealing a single, blinking red switch. End quote. Don and Oppos. Touch anything? End quote. She warned. End quote. We need answers. End quote. I replied. End quote. We need to stay hidden. End quote. End quote. Ignorance kills faster than claws. End quote. I slammed my palm down on the crimson button. The bunker groaned heavily. Hidden diesel generators kicked into gear, vibrating violently through the concrete floor. Fluorescent lights flickered on, humming loudly and casting a harsh, sterile glare. The dead screens flared to life, displaying a complex grid of dozens of live camera feeds. They showed the jungle canopy, the bloody beach, and the smoking plane wreckage. We had the ultimate advantage. We could track the roaming monsters. We could clearly see the remaining 53 girls stumbling blindly through the hostile trees, completely unaware of the lenses tracking their every terrified step. I scanned the displays, a triumphant, arrogant smirk crossing my face. We controlled the board. We held all the cards. Then the massive primary screen shifted. It didn't end Oppos. Show the dark forest anymore. It showed us, standing right there in the bunker. I stared directly at the lens of the hidden camera blinking maliciously above the console. The heavy iron door behind us slammed shut with a deafening, metallic crash. The thick electronic locks automatically engaged, hissing aggressively as they sealed us inside. My phone buzzed in my torn pocket. I pulled it out. A single, anonymous text message glowed on the cracked glass. And Oppos, welcome to the arena. Phase 2 begins now. And Oppos, I stared at the glowing phone screen. My thumb hovered over the cracked glass. The heavy iron door behind us was sealed tight, the locking mechanism welded shut by a sudden, intense electrical surge. The subterranean bunker wasn't a sanctuary. It was a reinforced holding pen. The spear wielder lunged at the massive console, her agile fingers frantically dancing across the dust-covered keyboard, desperately searching for an override command. End quote. It and Oppos. As heavily encrypted, end quote. She hissed, slamming her fist against the cold metal desk. End quote. We are trapped. End quote. System override detected. Biometric lock engaged. A sharp, freezing needle of pain pierced the base of my skull, arriving simultaneously with the sterile system notification. The metallic silver scar on my forearm pulsed with a sickening, neon blue rhythm. I dropped heavily to one knee, clutching my throbbing head as the foreign core inside my chest aggressively synced with the bunker's isolated mainframe. I thought the twisted experiment was just about culling the weak academy students. I thought we were fighting for our own pathetic lives. Then the primary monitor shifted, replacing the jungle camera views with a live, global dark web auction feed. We weren't the desperate contestants. We were the highly valued products. And the remaining 53 girls stumbling through the dark forest Warren and Oppos. Innocent prey, they were unstable biological weapons, currently bidding at $10 million each. The heavily armed extraction team Wazn and Oppos. Flying in to rescue anyone. They were coming to harvest the purchased inventory. End quote. They are going to wipe our fragmented memories and ship us in metal crates. End quote. The spear wielder whispered, her usual stone-cold facade finally shattering, revealing raw, genuine horror. She raised her crude wooden spear, pressing the rusted metal blade directly against her own pale throat. A tragic, false defeat. She actively chose suicide over eternal subjugation. I didn't end Oppos. Let her finish the fatal motion. I lunged forward rapidly, grabbing the sharp edge firmly with my bare hand. The rusted metal sliced my palm deep, but my newly mutated blood cells instantly clotted the severe wound. I ripped the weapon away violently, hurling it into the pitch-black corner of the damp room. I grabbed her trembling shoulders, forcing her terrified eyes to meet my glowing, silver-flecked gaze. End quote. They desperately need the primary control core. End quote. I said, my voice echoing unnaturally in the cramped, sterile space. End quote. And I just fully absorbed it. End quote. I slapped my bloody palm flat against the console and Oppo's cracked biometric scanner. The ancient machine whirred loudly, reading the synthetic, rhythmic pulse radiating from my altered veins. The auction feed on the screen instantly glitched, turning a brilliant, warning crimson. The heavy front door didn't end Oppo's open, but a concealed elevator shaft at the back of the room groaned loudly to life, ascending rapidly from the deep island bedrock. We stepped into the rusted metal cage. The old mechanism shuddered violently, pulling us continuously upward toward the bloody beach, arriving exactly where the mercenary helicopters would soon land. That night, I learned that true survival doesn't end Oppo's belong to the physically strongest fighter. It belongs to the monster who learns how to smile back. And the ultimate power ISN and Oppo's a sharp weapon. It and Oppo's knowing exactly what to whisper when the ruthless executioner finally arrives. But as the elevator breached the sandy surface, I spotted the bright red insignia painted on the side of the descending military chopper. It didn't an Oppo's belonged to an anonymous shadow corporation. Why did it proudly display my dead father and Oppo's corporate logo?